Welcome! Today we will talk about consonant sounds and their place of articulation. First, let's look at how sounds are made. So there's an airstream coming through the lungs, through the mouth, and sometimes through the nasal cavity. Now this sounds very much like breathing, but what's the difference between breathing and actually making sounds? It turns out that this airstream is blocked. As it's coming out through the mouth or through the nose, there are things happening within the vocal tract that will affect the sound of the airstream. Different combinations will create different sounds. Now, let's think about how to describe consonant sounds and how to look at these different combinations. When you typically talk about consonants, there's voicing, place, and manner, which describe how consonants are made or how this airstream is changed. Think about the difference between these two phonemes, g versus m. Now, if you think about g, think about what parts of your mouth are moving, touching against each other, how they're reacting, and pay attention what's happening with your tongue, with your jaw. And when you do is completely different because of what's happening. Let's take two others. For example, s versus f. They may sound a little bit similar on the video, but when you actually produce each one, you notice that there's something that's happening that's different in your mouth. Now, when we're trying to describe consonants, today we'll be focusing on the place of articulation and where that is happening. So what is the difference in place of articulation between these sounds? Place of articulation is where the airstream is obstructed to form consonant sounds. Now, how this happens is the difference between articulators and places of articulation. When we're thinking about articulators, they are the parts that move within your mouth, like, for example, your tongue, your lips. But when we're thinking about places of articulation, in general, we talk about the immovable pieces of your vocal tract, like, for example, teeth or the palate. The point where they come together is what we consider the place of articulation of a consonant, which is one of the factors that we use to describe. Now, what should we focus on? In English, we typically talk about these. So it's the lips, the teeth, the alveolar ridge. If you take the tip of your tongue and if you roll it behind your teeth, there's a little bump right there that you feel, a little hard bump. That's the alveolar ridge. If you continue with your tongue going further back, that's what we call the hard palate. Keep touching the hard palate and try to go further back. You will notice there's a little soft part behind the hard palate that's actually called the soft palate or the velum. You also have the uvula, the glottis, where very few sounds in English are made with the glottis, but it is used. And obviously, the most important part, which is the tongue. And it's how the tongue reacts with all these little places, which makes the sounds. Now, the tongue is divided into three parts: the tip of the tongue, the blade of the tongue, and the back of the tongue. And it's these different parts that will come together at a place of articulation that will differentiate one consonant from another. In English, there are 6 basic places of articulation. The first one is bilabial, and it's both lips coming together and creating a sound. The sounds that are created with both lips are p, like in pay or happy or tap, and b, like in bay, abbey or tab, and m, like in may or hammer or jam. In all these sounds, both lips are coming together to create the sound. Now, there's another sound that's considered bilabial, where both lips don't actually close to create the sound, but they come very close together and they create this sound, which is w. It is typically the sound you'll find in the W, like in way or awoke. It's still considered a bilabial sound, even if both lips don't close, but they are close enough and they are used enough so that this sound is considered a bilabial sound. The next place of articulation occurs right there with the obstruction of the airstream made by the top teeth touching the lower lip. These are labiodental sounds. For example, like in feel or defy or proof, or v, like in veal or bravery or prove. These are the only two labiodental sounds in the English language. The next sound that we will look at is interdental sounds. With interdental sounds, the tip of the tongue comes between the teeth, as you can see right here, and they are used to create this sound. Now, you may not recognize this symbol, which is part of the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, but it is the sound that occurs in thing, or toothache, or path. There are only two interdental sounds in the English language. The other one is this other sound, which is also created with the TH, but it has a slightly different sound. The difference between the first and the second sound is that the second sound includes a little bit of vibration that's happening. So this sound is the one that occurs in those, teething, and bathe. The first sound has no vibration, and the second sound is very similar to that first sound, but includes a little bit of vibration. Going further down the vocal tract, we will look at the next place of articulation, which is called alveolar. Alveolar sounds are created with the tip of the tongue touching or approaching the alveolar ridge. These sounds are t, like in top, acted, or bet, d, like in daze, abandon, or bed, s, like in soda, passing, and bus. Now, this sound changes a little bit because the tip of the tongue is not actually touching the alveolar ridge, but it's approaching it, and it is the tongue which causes that change in the airstream, and it is close enough to the alveolar ridge that it is considered an alveolar sound. You also have z, like in zipper, buzzing, and quiz. L, like in light, belly, and call. Like in right, carry, and car. And n, like in night, manner, and can. The alveolar place of articulation is the most common place of articulation in the English language and has the most consonants. The next sound is alveopalatal, and this occurs when the blade of the tongue approaches the hard palate. Now, these sounds are symbols that you may not know, but you've definitely heard. Sounds like, for example, shout, nation, and splash. Or zh, which is actually a sound that comes from the French and very rarely occurs at the beginning of a word, like in genre, or vision, or beige. You also have the ch sound. And if you notice, it's a combination of two symbols, and this is the sound that occurs in champion, and pitcher, and catch. Even if it's a combination of two symbols, it's actually just one sound. Also, the sound j, and that's the sound that happens in jacket, badger, and age. You also have one more alveopalatal sound, which is the sound of the Y, which is y, like in yes, or Gruyere. Finally, the last place on our list, and the place of articulation that occurs the farthest back within the vocal tract, is the velar. Sounds produced with the back of the tongue approaching the velum, or the soft palate. These are sounds like k, like cat, faking, attack, or g, like gear, soggy, and tag. And this sound, which you may not recognize, but it is every N that occurs before a velar sound. Like, for example, in sink and thing. Actually, right here, the N that you're producing is not a regular alveolar N, but it's actually a velar N that's preparing for the velar sound that's happening next. And in the word thing, you're actually not pronouncing the G, but you are doing this sound right here, which is thing. We will talk more about these sounds in future videos. Right now, let's do a little bit of practice. If you don't have a piece of paper with you, pause the video and go get one. So number your paper from 1 to 10. So I will dictate 10 words. For the first 5 words, or words 1 through 5, you will write the phoneme of the initial sound of the word and its place of articulation. Then from words 6 through 10, you will write the phoneme of the final sound and its place of articulation. If you don't know all the phonemes at this point, don't worry, just try your best. So for example, I will dictate a word, pig, pig, pig. So the initial sound of that word is p, and it is bilabial. Now, if I'm dictating words 6 through 10, we would be looking for the final sound. So if I dictate pig, 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 then you would write the phoneme, which is g, and its place of articulation, which is velar. So let's try this dictation now. I will dictate each word 3 times. Number 1, mother, mother, mother. Number 2, splash, splash, splash. Number 3, days, days, days. Number 4, booth, booth, booth. Number 5, fake, fake, fake. Now we're going with final sounds. Number 6, mother, mother, mother. Number 7, splash, splash, splash. Number 8, days, days, days. Number 9, booth, booth, booth. And number 10, fake, fake, fake. Let's check your answers. Now, if you did not get all the sounds at this point, do not worry. It's sometimes harder to pick up the sounds through a video. This was just the introduction to place of articulation, and we still have so much to go before understanding the different and slight nuances between consonants and how to describe them completely. I hope you find this introduction helpful in your path to understanding a little bit more about phonetics.